Those Vietnamese who had supported the US presence in their country had most to fear. America promised to take care of them, whatever happened. But exit strategies are notoriously unreliable.
They say everybody in the whole world knew that Saigon, we are going to lose Saigon. But they say within Saigon, it's people didn't want to believe it. People just still hope that American would not leave us. The Western world would not leave us.
This is the story of what happens when the battle is lost. The 55 days leading to the fall of Saigon. At the end of 1974, the Communist North Vietnamese Army launched an attack on the Republic of South Vietnam. An uneasy truce that had held for nearly 2 years was over. It was the opening gambit in the North's plan for final victory, a campaign to unify the country once and for all. For 20 years, Vietnam had been one of the chief battlegrounds of the Cold War. It was divided into Communist North and US-backed South. Over 1 million American soldiers had fought for 10 years to keep communism out of South Vietnam. But 58,000 American dead became too much to take, and in 1973, Nixon brought the troops home.
Now that we have achieved an honorable agreement, let us be proud that America did not settle for a peace that would have betrayed our allies.
Publicly, America stayed committed to South Vietnam. But from now on, the South would have to do the fighting alone. America would provide the money, weapons, and military expertise. It took the North Vietnamese less than 3 weeks to take the entire province of Phuc Long. Encouraged, the northern commanders now began to plan their assault on the ultimate prize, Saigon. Saigon, capital of South Vietnam, seemed oblivious to the danger ahead. Despite the war, the city had been spared any real fighting for 8 years. For those Americans still stationed there at the beginning of 1975, it represented freedom and good times.
It was fun. We lived like a rich man in a poor country. We made maybe $400 a month, and just to compare that with the Vietnamese, the average Vietnamese secretary would make $30 a month. The average Vietnamese general would make $100 a month, so we were considered very rich. We could have anything we wanted when we were over there. Kind of spoiled us in a way, but it was a lot of fun for a 20, 21-year-old.
Marine Sergeant Doug Patraz arrived in Vietnam in 1974 to be an embassy guard. He got together with a local girl, Hoa, who had a 3-year-old daughter.
You could get a lot of different girls, not just bar girls. There's a lot of girls that were secretaries and worked for different embassies and stuff that you got to know. It's just a matter of money, I guess. And they looked at you as security or maybe a route back to the United States.
If Saigon was ever to fall to the north, there was one group of South Vietnamese who would be in particular danger. Many in Saigon had adopted the American way of life. They worked for American organizations or the American-backed South Vietnamese government. To the communists, they were all collaborators.
I was more American because I was the first one in my family who spoke English.
Kim Luan Hill worked for an American Catholic charity, helping the orphans of war. The American occupation had given her opportunities denied to most middle-class Vietnamese girls.
You have to know someone. And only with the American that I got a job to support my family. And the first question was, is that wrong to work for American? I don't think so. I mean, everybody, it's just making money. I wasn't, for me, politics don't play a role in my life at those times.
From the safety of Saigon, the North Vietnamese threat seemed remote.
And I wear a mini skirt. I like it. And it was kind of chubby for Vietnamese standard. And so I enjoy it, and then with the skirt I can move. I'm a tomboy. And so with the skirt or with pants or jeans, I can move quicker, I can do things I want, and I ride motorcycle, and I race motorcycle with my cousin when I grew up. And so I was just a completely different, so maybe I adopted the Western ideas and stuff because it fit me better. So we are the new group of people that American culture created. I hate to say that, but I'm not ashamed of it.
American forces may have left South Vietnam, but American money was still the key to the country's survival. At the heart of Saigon was the center of American power, the U.S. Embassy.
The Americans were an enormous presence, even with the troops withdrawn. We were a huge embassy. Just about every faction of the U.S. government that had a stake in foreign affairs was involved in the embassy, one way or the other out there.
The embassy was led by Ambassador Graham Martin. A career diplomat, he had previously been ambassador in Bangkok and Rome. Saigon was to be his last post before retirement.
He was tough, he was brilliant, indefatigable, he was total control, wanted it, got it, knew how to use it.
Ambassador Martin certainly had a very incisive, penetrating intellect. Graham Martin could go to the heart of any question or an issue very, very quickly.
On the other hand, you know, there were those of us, I'm one of them, who thought there was a devious quality to him.
Martin went to Vietnam with a mission. He would do everything in his power to ensure that South Vietnam would never fall.
He told me that he was going to go to Vietnam and he did not intend to give the country away to the communists, and that's a view that I could strongly share with him.
It was a hardline embassy. Graham Martin had surrounded himself with people who thought as he did, were true believers in the sense that they were doing the right thing, the country had a chance, and that it was U.S. responsibility to see to it that the country got every additional chance it could be given. It was an emotional / intellectual belief system that believed that we could rebuild a democracy there. Not rebuild, build a democracy there.
Martin's hopes for South Vietnam rested on its president, Nguyen Van Thieu. Thieu's army was desperately in need of continued U.S. aid if it was to resist an attack from the north. Martin spent a lot of time in Washington, lobbying for funds for South Vietnam. The problem was that Congress, which had to approve the money, saw Thieu and his army as weak and corrupt. Martin sent a cable to the White House, expressing his frustration.
Propaganda by those American puppets of Hanoi in the American press and among American politicians has totally obscured the fact that enormous changes have taken place here in the past year. South Vietnam's forces have matured into an effective military machine, capable of handling the entire range of the capabilities possessed by North Vietnamese forces. Washington is where the trouble is, not Vietnam.
Martin's battle with Congress would now come to a head. A congressional delegation was sent to Saigon. They would decide whether to carry on bankrolling the South. Congressman Pete McCluskey was a member of the delegation.
This is a major national debate we're going through as to whether or not the United States, faced for the first time in our history without controlling oil prices, we're going to have to contract our exercise of...
Everything I saw in all of our visits there were that the Vietnamese wanted a reunited country. They weren't up to fighting for what America thought was so crucial. They didn't like communism, but they weren't going to fight. And I've always felt that any money that we had given or any more military assistance, tanks, artillery, planes, bombs, none of that would have survived against the North Vietnamese. Any money would have been money down a rat hole.
Martin's deputy and right-hand man was Wolfgang Lehmann. He showed the members of Congress around.
Well, some of the members of Congress were interested solely in embarrassing the South Vietnamese government and embarrassing the American embassy and embarrassing the President of the United States.
The delegation encountered a siege mentality at the embassy.
I thought it was an unreal world in that embassy. Magnetized by the ambassador's leadership or the demands on his part that they all tell the same story, you had an embassy that was cowed into accepting this sense of unreality.
They had already made up their minds. They had already made up their minds that they didn't want to do anything. Their conduct could be best termed as having been obscene.
They were trying to convince us to get the Congress of the United States to send more money to Vietnam, that Vietnam was really a good government and succeeding. And it's not wholly unlike what our government has been saying to us about Iraq recently. You always get government people refusing to face the real truth if it's embarrassing to what the administration wants to do.
McCluskey's delegation returned to Washington, and Congress delivered its verdict. There would be no further increase in aid to South Vietnam. It was a financial and psychological blow to the Saigon regime. Martin and his team were furious.
Frankly, I personally had not expected much better. But still, you know, it made us feel pretty badly. And it certainly demoralized the South Vietnamese.
He ordered his troops to abandon the Central Highlands. He was giving up 6 provinces to the North Vietnamese without a shot being fired. His calculation was he could use the troops to reinforce the defense of Saigon.
It was far from being a glorious moment. This armored spearhead of officers, men and their families had abandoned the rest of the convoy of 150,000 civilians. They were supposed to lead convoy Bravo 7 to safety, but the plan was ignored when the communist forces blockaded the road 15 miles from here. It was certainly not a case of women and children first, gallant soldiers last.
Martin's confidence in the South Vietnamese army was not borne out. Army officers were the first to run, followed by their men, and finally, tens of thousands of civilians. Many of them were killed in North Vietnamese ambushes along what was to become known as the Convoy of Tears. Thieu's gamble to abandon the Central Highlands had taken his allies completely by surprise.
Ils ont pris la décision, M. Thieu a pris la décision sans en informer les Américains au préalable. Et c'est moi, bizarrement, qui est informé l'ambassadeur des États-Unis de cette décision que M. Thiou m'avait raconté le plus naturellement du monde. Il m'a raconté, il m'a dit voilà, nous allons évacuer. Et nous allons nous rassembler autour de Saigon. Et alors il se trouve que quelques heures après, j'ai rencontré M. Martin par hasard. Enfin, et je lui ai dit à propos, donc vous savez, les sudistes enfin, sont en train d'évacuer les plateaux. Et alors là, il a blémé, il m'a dit mais c'est pas possible. Je lui ai dit écoutez, c'est ce que m'a dit le président. Maintenant, vous êtes a priori mieux informé que moi des mouvements de l'armée vietnamienne. Il ne le savait pas.
The North Vietnamese now headed for the coast, threatening to split South Vietnam in two. Hundreds of thousands of refugees flooded into the coastal cities of Nha Trang and Da Nang.
And at that time, I still remember that all the schools had to be opened up for the refugee to come. So we see a lot of refugees everywhere coming from, all the cities from the north.
Long's family were anti-communist Catholics who had once lived in the north. They brought their children up with tales of communist horrors.
What I worry most is that they're going to kill my parents because they escaped the north. And then they kill me because I'm their family. I would fear that they would burn down all the church and all of my school because, we're not communist. The most extreme case is that they would bury you to the neck and they would kill you after that.
The rumors of communist reprisals spread through Da Nang, South Vietnam's second largest city. With the North Vietnamese now poised to take Da Nang, its frightened citizens became desperate to get out.
It was chaos. Everybody was, trying to figure out how to get out, and of course, the people that had American contacts were all trying to lean to us to see if they could get some help from the U.S. government. It was like a colony of ants that all of a sudden smelled honey. From very, very quiet days and normal days, all of a sudden there were people, little ants, running everywhere you could see. Combination of people trying to locate relatives, trying to find out ways to get out of the country, trying to salvage household goods as much as they could, which ones could they pack and take out. There's a whole combination of reasons for people to be moving back and forth in various parts of the city.
My mom asked me to go buy a ticket for the family to go to Saigon. And I remember to go buy a ticket, I had to fight my way through a lot of people to get to the counter. But we're lucky enough to buy enough ticket for my mom and a bunch of us to go to Saigon.
Long and his family left for Saigon. They were among the lucky ones.